Dirty on WMNF. Good morning, Jason. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, sir?
We're doing great. We're looking forward to a good show this morning. We are talking the environment, the Florida environment, with one of our experts about the Florida environment. Craig Pittman, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you fine. I don't feel I'm an expert on Florida's environment though, or on pro wrestling. I should add that.
These are not your expertises, sir?
Well, I'm just a guy who asks a lot of questions.
There you go.
Well, we appreciate your questioning, sir. I mean, thank you for doing what you do. A big fan over here as well.
A little background. Craig Pittman has been a journalist with the Tampa Bay. Well, previously the St. Pete Times, then the Tampa Bay Times. I think 30-something years, and did write about the Florida environment of Florida and the trashing of the environment of Florida. Many other things. I'm sure he's also an author on many of the same subjects, and also about the Florida man. The Florida man. I never heard that term until my daughter. My daughter's also a writer, Craig, but she made a reference a couple years ago. Dad, you're such a Florida man.
You are a Florida man.
I don't even know. It's like I don't even know what that meant. But anyway, Craig Pittman, we are so glad you could join us. Craig's coming to us an hour earlier. He's up in Pensacola, helping Mama clean out the house a little bit. But,
yeah. She's 91, but in much better shape than I am. She does yoga.
So you're not quite as flexible as what I'm hearing.
Not nearly, no.
Well, that's impressive. Well, let's get down to some serious chat. Jason, Craig made a reference to wrestling. In doing my research this week, I was going to introduce him as a Long Island native and professional wrestler, and then I was informed that I had the wrong Craig Pittman, so I'm an idiot. So.
This is the danger of doing your own research.
But but
I learned it on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
This Craig Pittman hails originally from Pensacola. Were you a military brat up there?
No. I'm a Florida native, so if we're interrupted by a biologist coming in to put a tag on me, that's why. I'm an endangered species. No, my dad was a land surveyor up here. He grew up in Jackson County, grew up on a peanut farm.
Wow.
Where his mom was a part-time sharecropper, believe it or not.
Wow.
And my mom is from Santa Rosa County, and so they met here in Pensacola and married, and I grew up here and have had my entire journalism career has been here in Florida because I contend it's the most interesting state. We call ourselves the Sunshine State, and that's just a lie we tell the tourists because we're actually, so many of our cities are rainier than famously rainy Seattle. But I think if we called ourselves the most interesting state, we could back that up. I mean, this is the only state where we have mermaids on the government payroll. And not to mention python hunters on the government payroll. Our state capitol was voted in an online poll to be the most phallic public building in the world. And I think the people who work there sometimes take that spirit too literally. There's just so much interesting stuff to tell you about Florida. We have more first magnitude springs than anywhere else in the world, and then we treat them like toilet bowls. So, there's just a lot to write about.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is the only state where someone has thrown a live alligator through the drive-through window of a Wendy's, and I'd like to think that makes us a truly unique and special place.
Well, and was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, the deadly weapon being the alligator.
I mean, it was a baby alligator. I really would dispute, is it a deadly weapon? It's a weapon.
It was a 3-footer, so
a weapon, deadly weapon.
Yeah, it was a deadly.
It's a butter knife of an alligator.
Let's put it this way: the clerk at the Wendy's was not happy about that. So,
I mean, I see this as an opportunity for free nuggets. I don't really understand where the problem here is.
Or chili. I love their chili.
The two of you are made for each other. One of the things that I love about Florida, and I was born here too, Craig, down here in Tampa, but are the small towns. And in a recent article, you were probably driving north. You were on 301 and you passed through Citra, Florida.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if 1 out of 10 of our listeners could tell us where. That's an opportunity for calling 813-239-9663. If you can tell us without Googling it up where Citra, Florida is. Jason, you have no idea.
I got you. How about Lorida, Florida?
Lorida, Florida?
Lorida, Florida.
I don't know that one.
Yeah.
That's a real place. I have driven through Lorida, Florida many a time.
My favorite small town Florida name is Taintsville.
Okay, I did not know this
Well,
one.
we're not going there. We are not going there.
It's an actual place because it taint Oviedo and it taint the other place that it's near. So that's where they got the name from.
I mean, hey, listen, that's a legitimate name. You could use it in Scrabble.
Yes.
Actually, no, you can't. It's a proper noun.
So in Citra, Florida,
Yes.
Craig, you
We
were
got a little off track.
you were passing through and you stopped at your favorite orange place, and it inspired you to write a little article the other day about the demise of the orange industry. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm all here for. Let's start.
Let me first correct you. I don't write articles now. I write columns.
Columns.
I write opinion.
Ooh, columns. Ioric,
Opinion
Doric,
columns.
or?
Well, I want to tell people. I want to make it because several people said, well, this article you wrote is full of your opinion. I said, yeah, it's a column. I write personal opinion columns backed up by reporting, and I was writing about how Florida's citrus industry is really in a world of hurt. I mean, they've suffered a worse decline and fall than the Roman Empire, a much more rapid one.
Let me throw in some numbers.
And Edward Gibbons hasn't written about it yet.
Let me throw in some numbers. We went from 1 million acres of land that was zoned for citrus back in 2012. A dozen years later, half of that, and going fast. We went from 240 million boxes at its heyday, and Florida's down to 12 million boxes. I think that's a 95% decline.
In 2018, I took a tour of Lake Alfred. They have the U.S. Citrus Research Institute out there with a gentleman named Dr. Stephen Futch, and he had mentioned to me that there was a Rhode Island in terms of acreage of fallow orange groves in the state of Florida. A Rhode Island in terms of geography. Sure. And then you postulate the loss of jobs from these rural sector counties. Like, where are these folks going to go to find employment? Because if you only have a high school education in a rural community, your skills are limited. And I think the concern for this long term for the state of Florida is significant. And to the point of Craig here, we're not really talking about it with the same kind of effort that we need to be.
Yeah. And the argument I was making was that Trump's tariff war with Canada was going to make this worse because Canada is a huge customer for Florida orange juice. And Prime Minister Trudeau was actually calling for Canada to respond to Trump's tariffs by slapping a big tariff on Florida orange juice. So, there's one more strike.
That's all. That's all we need. When my dad arrived in Florida in 1954, 2 years before I was born, he worked for Florida Citrus Mutual.
Yep.
Which I think is barely still around. And then
still in Oakland. Yeah.
And then subsequently in the 90s, he worked for Likes Pasco, which was up in Dade City, doing citrus business. So part of the reason I guess we're even in Florida is because of citrus.
And it's the international identity of the state. I mean, you could say it's Mickey Mouse. I would argue it's an orange.
Looks like we had a call, perhaps somebody identifying where Citra, Florida is.
We have John from Sarasota. John, you are on the air.
Citra is on 301. It's about 5 miles south of Cross Creek.
That is some specificity right there.
325.
It's just a little bit south of Gainesville. Cross Creek, of course, being famous for Marjorie Kinnan Rollins, the author, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Yearling.
Yeah, it's right down the road from my house.
Man, that sounded like you were about to break out like longitude and latitude. Like it is specifically at this degree north.
Hey, I've been through there a billion times.
Well, listen. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your history of Florida.
What award does he get?
An air and a radio high five. Sir, is your hand above your head? Please understand that you are feeling my hand brush against your hand in a form of a high five.
All right, Craig, back to the serious stuff. So the demise of the Florida citrus industry, many man-made causes, and obviously including sprawling housing complexes.
Yes. Hurricanes and disease have been a big problem, but also developers, the minute some citrus grower is thinking I should give this up, a developer's right there with a big check saying, I'll take that high and dry land off your hands and pave it all, and then all the storm water that has been soaked into the ground will start being washed away onto the parcel's neighbors.
And how about those gopher tortoises also?
Yeah.
But I mean, so much of this is, ultimately it's the fault of a very, very, very tiny insect, the Asian citrus psyllid.
That's a terrible thing to say about Governor DeSantis.
It is. You're right. I mean, like DeSantis's boots, it's a tiny white insect. It's not a large white pair of boots. He was just in town just yesterday. It's the Asian citrus psyllid. It spreads HLB or Wong Wong Bing, which is a disease which basically kills the rootstock of the tree, causes the fruit to fall early.
Is that the greening?
Yeah, that is what causes citrus greening. Yeah. And I'll say, when I met with Mr. Futch, now got 7 years ago, the thing that I found fascinating is he said the greatest problem faced by a lot of citrus growers is the number one markup they have is on grapefruit. Grapefruit can sell for a really large markup, particularly in the Asian markets. And grapefruit, because they're the heaviest of the citrus trees, they're the ones when greening hits, they fall off fastest. So it's like the one product that would help them make the most money is the one that is the most negatively affected by this disease. It's really, it is a maelstrom of all things awful for Florida citrus. Yeah. And I mean, I don't really, they're talking about pogomia and other trees as a way for those folks to keep those lands agricultural. But I mean, candidly, I don't know that there's an answer to this outside of eventually we're all just going to be importing Brazilian oranges. Well, and I didn't get into this in the column, but the other big problem they're facing is a lot of people don't eat breakfast anymore. And they certainly don't drink orange juice. So it's lost the public acclaim, the public appeal, the public desire that it once counted on. I used to grow tangerines in my backyard, and my wife and I loved getting them, and the kids would go out with me to collect them. My wife and I would be the ones to eat them. The kids had no interest in eating the tangerines, and that's certainly the case. A lot of people, they'll grab a cup of coffee and that will be breakfast, or a thing of yogurt, and that'll be breakfast. Nobody's eating, 2 eggs scrambled and toast and bacon for breakfast with a glass of orange juice.
Yeah, I've got tangerines on my counter, and just as more as a snack food all day long. So if they're sitting on the counter, I'm walking by, I'll have a tangerine.
Good for you.
Or a mandarin or whatever.
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem to what Craig is saying is also the fact that, you think about how conscious the American diet has become about sugar. And if you're conscious about your sugar intake, which so many folks are, if you're diabetic, you have diabetes in your family, you might not be so quick to go to a glass of orange juice that's 20 grams of sugar, a glass. Right. And I'll say the other thing is the taste quite isn't what it is. I mean, I fresh squeezed orange juice from a local Florida orange is a really, truly special thing to behold. I mean, like when you get it from Tropicana at Publix, forgive me, it is just absolutely not the same. It's been pasteurized and treated a million times, and it's not the same product.
Maybe it's the water you're using.
No, I just like I really, it's a tragedy because
I loved what you wrote, Craig, about who was it? Okay. Was it Mormino who said about the
Gary Mormino when they developed concentrate, he said the most functional sentence in the English language is add 3 cups of water and stir.
Yeah, I love that. It's the only recipe I can remember. So let's talk about some other environmental issues impacting Florida. It looks like that other brain surgeon, our new president, is proposing offshore drilling off the state of Florida. Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, he did this in 2017, and now he's back where he says, we have to open up everywhere, including the Eastern Gulf, for offshore drilling because there's an energy emergency, which, to begin with, there's not an energy emergency. The oil companies all made record profits and had record production under the Biden administration. And honestly, there are leases out in the Gulf of Mexico, out in the Western and Central Gulf that they haven't even used yet. So for him to want to open up more drilling in the Eastern Gulf, which would be closer to Florida, is just horrific. And so I was writing about how stupid that was, number one, but number two, how a lot of Republican office holders who objected very strongly back in 2017 when he proposed this now have been remarkably silent. And yes, I'm talking about Senator Rick Scott, among others.
Yeah, and of course Rubio, I think, had, really all the federal legislators kind of banded together 5-6 years ago when this came up the last time. And you're right, I haven't heard a peep out of any of, well, maybe the Democrats, but
I have to say, she loves Trump so much she wants to put him on Mount Rushmore. But Anna Paulina Luna actually said we should protect the Eastern Gulf. We should make it permanently off limits to oil drilling. So there you go. And she actually saw Deepwater Horizon oil on Florida beaches, and that
and she's got guns strapped to her shoulders too.
Well, there you go. So she can take on anybody, I guess.
Well, we have another call. We got Chris calling all the way from Gainesville. Believe it or not, Chris from Gainesville. Thank you so much for being so patient. You are on the air.
Great. Well, I think it's just wonderful that you've got Craig Pittman on there. He's a real hero in a field of folks who are not always real heroes. But I think it's come down to the folks that write columns like his. And Carl Hiaasen, of course, is another similar hero in our state who are really making a big difference. I've spent 30 years in Florida's Department of Environmental Protection before I was summarily fired, along with nothing personal, 240 other people one day. And Mr. Pittman wrote some great columns about that whole approach to environmental protection.
What year was that?
Then Governor Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember his articles. Craig used to actually come and speak at a couple of our environmental protection conferences down there. And that was very refreshing and very encouraging for all of us workers on the lower levels of the DEP. And the one point I wanted to make, and you can get back to your great guest, is that environmental protection has constantly been eroded in my 30 years of lifetime with the DEP. And springs, which were brought up earlier by Craig, have been completely destroyed in many ways and are certainly not what they used to be. And part of the problem is that the people's reaction to this kind of thing has been muted and, in fact, transformed to actually be kind of a buffer. So there's a lot of people out there taking wonderful pictures, writing great stories, and beautiful paintings that about Florida's environment, but they're not really getting at the crux of the issue, which is stopping the people who are destroying it. And there is one effort underway, there has been for a long time, to actually prosecute the law that protects the environment. And my main point here is that law really protects our children. Children are by far the most affected by pollution and by degradation of the environment. That is, they're smaller kids.
No, yeah, listen, we had Max Chesnes on the show just a couple weeks ago to talk about the fiasco with the state parks, where, to Max's credit, he just recently broke even more news as it relates to that story, that it is, in fact, clear that Ron DeSantis was very well aware of the nonprofit Folds of Honor and their attempt to develop Jonathan Dickinson State Park long before he admits that they had done so. So, yeah, I mean, kudos to folks like Craig and Max and a lot of other good folks out there that are breaking these stories to help us protect our environment.
Yeah, and the one approach that does work when it's used is with the legal system. There is, or at least there was, and there still is in many counties, an environmental crimes task force in every judicial circuit in the state. It was fairly active in the Ocala, Marion County district, and in Gainesville, the 8th Judicial Circuit, and I was very actively involved in that. And we had lots and lots of actual criminal activity by polluters that we were taking up because the DEP had tried to approach them administratively, and they'd gone on to become such a criminal enterprise that it went through the Environmental Crimes Task Force.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Listen, we appreciate
Chris, I have a question for you. So the task force, an example of a crime like that, if somebody sees somebody dumping 5 gallons of oil out in the woods or something like that, that would be pretty typical, right?
Well, that was some of what we approached, yes, but the real example that came through the DEP that often was people who were continually thumbing their nose at the administrative rules and enforcement, and every administrative rule carries a criminal sanction if you completely disregard it and flaunt your criminal activity without stopping. So the DEP would try to stop people from industries from routinely polluting, and when they just said no, we don't care, and often they did this legislatively through their representatives, just said you're not going to do anything to us.
Well, and Chris, we do appreciate you coming on. Right up your way, I think I read an article. Did you write it, Craig, or did Max write it? About, I have to be careful. It was a developer I want to say maybe Pulte homes. But anyway, just plowing under.
Yeah, I wrote about that.
Yeah, dozens of gopher tortoises, killing dozens of gopher tortoises. They got caught. The administrative action was, what was it, Craig? $15,000 of fines.
It was a paltry penalty for Pulte, and that's why I wrote about it. I was remarkably proud of the state attorney's office for prosecuting them. They took this case very seriously. I mean, there were 22 gopher tortoise burrows that were plowed under, and at least 2 gopher tortoises that were slaughtered by the bulldozer that was out there, probably more, because they buried them alive, and so they prosecuted them to the fullest extent of the law, which turns out to be not much, and got this.
Well,
really
part of the problem,
penalty.
having been in the criminal justice system previously, Craig, part of the problem is they went after the corporation instead of perhaps some of the managers, because if they went after
them too. No, they went after both.
Well, they didn't assess any jail time or probation or any typical criminal sanctions that they might have, right?
They went after the top amount they could get under the law, and the law is so weak that was all they could get was about $15,000.
Right,
so,
but if it was a misdemeanor,
so the company just said, okay, fine, we'll plead guilty. Here's a check, and we're going on. And
right, but I do believe it was a misdemeanor, and a misdemeanor does carry potential prison time. The first degree misdemeanor, 30 days in jail. Second degree, 60 days in jail. Third degree, a year in jail. And that's what I'm saying. If they had slapped some of those managers who were directly responsible with a little bit of county jail time, that might have got the attention of Pulte and some of the other developers, right?
Maybe, but you bear in mind too that our jails and prisons tend to be overcrowded. The one case I followed all the way through and actually wrote a book about it, which was the one about Selby Gardens being charged with wildlife smuggling over an endangered orchid that was brought into the United States and disseminated here, and the prosecutor was actually pushing for jail time for some of the people involved, and the judge said, I am not putting people in jail for a flower. That's just all there is to it. And so I'm sure they were cognizant they would run into a similar resistance from a judge saying, I'm not putting people in jail over gopher tortoises. I'll put them in there for drugs, but not for
Although if you abuse a dog or a cat, a lot of people go to jail for that, but I guess we
should.
Yeah, I guess we have a different standard for.
No, I mean, listen,
gopher tortoise,
which is just such a shame because you talk about you can't protect the species if you're not actively protecting it. That's kind of like a $15,000 fine for some kind of large developer is like they scoff at that. Like, all right, one less sushi buffet.
We are down and dirty. 813-239-9663 is the call-in number. We are talking to New York Times best-selling author and former St. Pete Times journalist, Craig Pittman. Craig is talking to us about all things Florida, including especially environmental issues. Craig Pittman, the right whale. Is there a wrong whale, Craig? But the right whale.
No, that was a good one. That was an excellent dad joke. That was excellent.
I try. The right whale off the coast of Florida and up and down the East Coast. What's going on with the right whale?
Well, the right whales are among the most endangered species around, and they live most of their lives up in the New England area, but then they come down to Georgia and Florida, the females do, in order to bear their calves. And so we see lots of them off, St. Augustine, Fernandina Beach, and so forth. Fernandina even has a right whale festival every year. And the one of the big threats to them are being hit by boats. They have rules for speed limits on big ships, like tankers, that are in the area where right whales are. But now they're being hit by smaller boats, say 65-foot boats. And so there was a proposal for them to put speed limits on those, and a lot of members of Congress freaked out about that, and people in the seafood industry and people in the commercial fishing industry. And it reminded me of the freakouts that we heard back in the 2000s from people when the state was proposing here in Florida was proposing speed limits on boats to protect manatees. And they're
Right.
saying, oh, you can't make us slow down. That's awful. That's one of our last vestiges of freedom is that we can go as fast as we want in our boats. And, just make the manatees get out of our way. That's a better way to do it.
Make the manatees speed up.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly. Put a motor on them.
Government-funded jetpacks for manatees.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. So I wrote a column about that, and that in the end, the folks from the federal government, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, wrote.
I remember that organization.
They were withdrawing that proposal because they didn't feel like they could get it in place before the new administration came in. And I was saying, no, they should not have given up. They should have changed the name of the whales to right-wing whales, and then Trump would have been all in favor of protecting them. So that was my suggestion, and a helpful one, I'm sure.
How does it feel, Craig, after all those years? I mean, I know you wrote some columns as well at the Times, but most of the time I think you were writing articles. But how does it feel to have the freedom to just write columns and give your opinion and that sort of thing? And you're doing it right now, by the way, with the Florida Phoenix.
Yes. I've been working for the Florida Phoenix for 4 years now. I really enjoy it. I miss the newsroom camaraderie at the Times. On the other hand, the number of mandatory staff meetings has dropped to 0, which is helpful. And I can make corny jokes and obscure pop culture references, and people tell me that helps them to get through all the sort of the bitterness of and the downbeatness of a lot of the environmental news. Is I'll make them laugh while making them cry. And so that's my goal, is to give them that spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And I do try and when I find I look for positive stories. Maybe 1 out of every 4 or 5 columns is a positive thing. So I wrote something on how the Okaloosa darter, a very small fish that was on the very first endangered species list, has now been recovered because the folks at Eglin Air Force Base worked really hard to restore their habitat. So there are positive environmental stories out there if you look for them, but you have to look for them.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, the manatees, has been overall, over a couple of decades, manatees has been a huge success, right?
Up until we had the big die-off in a couple of years ago.
The
we
red
had,
tide.
About two. Well, not red tide. It was
No, this was a starvation.
it
the
was-
seagrass
Yeah,
thing?
yeah. Lots of seagrass beds died in the Indian River Lagoon, and like 40% of the seagrass beds, and manatees were starving, and we ended up losing about 2,000 manatees out of a population of about 6,000. So
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Jesus.
Yeah,
And-
and
Manatee genocide.
probably man-made to a great extent.
Yeah, I would say so.
Literally manatee genocide.
And it got to the point where they actually were trucking lettuce out to the Indian River Lagoon and throwing it out for the manatees to feed them. This hand feeding by humans in order to try and rescue some of them. And the manatees, they're very adaptable creatures. They learn to go there and they learn to eat the lettuce, which is not their natural food. They naturally eat.
And now they're developing
Seagrass.
a government dependency. We're making
Yeah,
manatees
exactly.
dependent upon the government.
Well,
Yeah.
they were a little picky at the time. They wanted iceberg. They got romaine. So it was problematic.
So we have a call. We have John in Bradenton who's been very patient. John, you are on the air.
Well, there's so many subjects that you guys went through since I've been holding.
It has only been 5 minutes.
This is fantastic.
We're speed something or other. Speed dating with Craig Pittman.
Speed dating with Craig Pitt.
Yeah, I love watching the manatees. I lived on a canal, and I always wanted to put a hula hoop around.
I think you may have a phone going off in your house, sir.
No, that's
Yes.
not me.
That's me.
Okay,
I'm
that's
sorry.
Craig.
All right, start over.
Well, you got a very interesting. You guys are all over the place. Where's the recipe for how to cook a manatee?
I wrote a book on manatees. It is not a cookbook. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a federal crime.
They do
Yeah.
eat manatees in Cuba, right? It is a something on the menu. Yeah.
So it sounds a little fatty.
Yeah,
well,
I don't know how good that meat's going to be.
There are reports from Seminole War veterans
let me
that
go back to
manatees
go back to where I
tasted
called
really
for.
good.
I called because you don't think there should be jail time for somebody that destroys the environment, but it's okay to put somebody in jail for a dog. Like I live in Manatee County. I mean, we dump so much sewage in the little Manatee or the Manatee River that I can't believe that it's not daily news about, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, I'm all for jail time. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for jail time for people who knowingly violate the law with environmental
I'll go
issues.
one step further. Go directly to the gulag.
It's not that they violate the law. That the law is not there. The developers don't know that they can build up. They're building 5 feet higher to the development next door to them, and now the old development's going to flood. It's not a law they're breaking. It's just stupidity, and they're allowing them to do this.
Well, we can't put them in jail if there's no law. But yes, you can advocate for stronger laws. Definitely.
I mean, that's what we need.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
All right. Thanks for your call.
so much
Thanks
your
for
call, John.
listening.
Appreciate you.
There's so many other things you guys talked about. My God.
I know. Well, listen, we got more to talk about.
Well, keep on listening.
Keep on listening.
Hey, listen, Craig Pittman, St. Pete Times, New York Times best-selling author. How about Panthers? How are we doing on Panthers, Craig?
Well, first, let me just mention real quick, Manatee County is one of the good news stories. Manatee County got rid of their pro-development commissioners, and they now have some more common sense folks that they've elected who are saying we're going to impose impact fees on new development, and we're going to try and slow down all the rampant development here.
Well, that's
So
good
maybe
because
that'll help.
Hillsborough is going the other direction. So
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So Panthers. So Florida Panthers in 1995, there were 20 of them left.
Jesus.
Because there were lots of genetic defects. They had the size of the population dwindled down, so there was a lot of inbreeding. And the sort of ragtag band of biologists and veterinarians said, well, the only thing we can do is try and bring in cougars from Texas. They're sort of a cousin, and breed them together, and maybe that'll help. And it did. And they succeeded in producing a baby boom among the Panthers that now there are about 200 of them roaming around in what's left of the wilderness in Florida. And that program, which they call genetic augmentation, was adopted by a lot of other folks around the world trying to save endangered species.
I guess it's sort of better than nothing, right?
Well, and it worked. And the point they had was that before humans invaded North America, the panthers naturally inbreeded all across the South.
Right.
So they felt like, well, this is a way to bring that back. And they've done several genetic studies since that time in the 90s and have found that the panthers that are being produced now are in fact purebred panthers. So they didn't swamp the genes or anything like that.
Do they growl with a Texas accent, though?
No, nor do they wear Stetsons. And
Is it a 10-gallon hat, or are you just happy to see me?
I'm always happy to see you. And then the problem, though, is that while we have been producing more panthers than ever, the feds have been giving away panther habitat to developers. So we have more panthers than ever before squeezed into a smaller space than ever before. And so we'll see what the end result of that is.
I know, God, heaven help me, I'm forgetting his name now. Carlton Ward, worked on the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and I know a lot of that was sort of organized around his piece, Pass of a Panther, which I'd highly recommend folks watch. I can't tell people to watch it, but I'll recommend it.
I don't know if that works or not.
I'm recommending. So much of that was oriented around protecting the panther and protecting Florida wildlife habitat throughout, kind of that central corridor of the state. Can you talk a little bit about how, whether or not that's been successful? Because even though, this has been a legislature and a governor that have not been very pro-environment, it would appear, at least on its face, that that's been one of the rare successes in a field that's been filled with a lot of failures.
Well, and also you got Florida Forever, and that program.
I'm glad you mentioned that, John, because one of the great ironies of Florida is that the legislature, which has sort of turned against Florida Forever, they say that, we don't like taking all that land away from the tax rolls and making it state property. But they very enthusiastically voted for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and 40% of the land for the Florida Wildlife Corridor is also land that would be protected under Florida Forever. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's just giving it a different name and making it look all shiny. And they're like, this is so much better. Well, it's the same stuff.
Well, and the other thing about Florida Forever lands, typically, as I've seen in the past, a lot of it's just ranch lands.
Yes.
It's agricultural zoned. It's agricultural taxed, which is taxed next to nothing.
Right.
So you're really not taking much of anything off the tax rolls. You're taking it out of the developer's hands, God forbid.
How will they get by? God, it's just so hard out here for them.
And I do want to give a shout out to good ranchers. You know, and most of the big ranchers out there, I think, are stewards of the land. They live on the land. They ride their horses out there. They raise their cows out there, and
They
in
raise
many
their families out there.
yeah, and in many cases, they're the ones who want to protect that. But unfortunately, like you said earlier, Craig, there's pressure from development. There's pressure from money, from inheritance taxes, et cetera, that sadly enough kind of twists their arm and makes them sell to the developers, and then we lose Panther land.
Yeah, in my next book, which is called Welcome to Florida, True Tales from America's Most Interesting State, and comes out next month.
Okay.
Oh, we're glad to catch that.
Plug.
There's a big piece about Florida's cattle industry and how important it is to the environment, and how it is the oldest industry in America, really, because it started when the Spanish came here.
And I recall I think we're the second largest grass-fed cattle
we
state.
used to be. I don't know if we
I think
still
I know we're top 3, at least, unless that's changed.
Certainly the largest east of the Mississippi, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So the cattle industry is very important, and very important to the saving of Florida's environment too.
Yeah, Jason, we got some calls. Let's take them.
Let's see.
Let's take them before they start complaining about us not taking them.
Well, John, you already got the call, so I'm patching some other people in. So we're starting with, I think, Elysian here. Elysian, if that's your name. You are on the air. Elysian, you there?
Allison? Are you asking for Allison?
Allison.
Sorry.
I'm a Craig Pittman fan from way back. But here's something that we still subscribe to the print newspaper at home, which I love, and because it's the only newspaper that's even worth reading anymore. But a lot of my friends will laugh at me. Here's one of the things that I have been doing on weekends, which my husband kind of thinks is crazy. I spend a lot of time looking through the legal ads because there's a lot of stuff that's outrageous there. And one of the things that I would share with you, if I could, that I'm driving on my phone, it's a picture. Is there was this guy, and this is about, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago, who there was a legal notice in the paper that he was applying for a variance so that he could ignore basically the speed zones for the manatees in one of the rivers on the West Coast, which to me is outrageous. I mean, why do we, because he's a commercial fisherman or something, maybe he's giving tours, but so he's applied for a variance, and the county was going to give him a variance to, and it was posted, it's a legal notice, unless anyone objects, and, nobody gives about the manatees, apparently, and they can't write to the newspaper or to the legal department and tell them, hey, you know what, it's our home. And I don't know how many people really spend time looking at legal ads, but there's just a lot of things going on in Hillsborough County where developers are getting things pushed through. The county lets them do it. The more that we develop, the more likely we're going to have flooding.
So, Allison, as a former elected official, I'm gonna impose on you the burden, because it's fantastic. You're reading the legal ads; nobody else does. But once you see something like that, then put it out there on Facebook. Put it out there, to various websites, so people can go down to the county commission. They can go to City Hall, because the elected officials, when nobody shows up, the elected officials rubber stamp stuff. When people show up, right, Jason? When people show up, things happen.
I mean, I'd like to say, listen, I'm going to try to stay optimistic.
Doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work. But
things happen, and they take notice.
Yeah, I'll say that. To that point, I will wholeheartedly agree. When people organically show up to these county commission or these city council meetings, I mean, you can confirm this having been on the other side of the dais, it absolutely affects the way people perceive that issue. Maybe they don't vote the way that the people in the crowd want, but it absolutely affects the perception of that issue.
It's the squeaky wheel. Allison, we appreciate you calling in. We're running out of time, but drive carefully, and thanks for listening. Who else we got, Jason?
Oh, no, we want to bring... All right, here we go. John, we're bringing you back for a little bit. John, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. As soon as I hung up, you said good thing about Manatee County. We got rid of the insiders. And let me tell you, am I allowed to name drop somebody? I mean, we got rid of Van Ostenbridge, but now he's the top real estate agent in Manatee County, and he's renting office buildings to the county. Like, how does this happen that my water department is now not in a county building? Now it's in a rental building somewhere off of Cortez Road. It's like, I can't believe what's going on here. You get rid of one guy and he pops up in the real estate. Now, that's all I had to say.
I mean, listen, it's a revolving door, right? If he were a congressperson, he'd become a lobbyist.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. The water department by the county is now in a private. They got to rent space. I can't. I just went to pay my water bill and it wasn't there. Anyhow,
all right,
good job, man.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Hey, Craig. We're talking to Craig Pittman. We got a couple more minutes for your calls. 813-239-9663. I didn't realize you had another book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that and the highlights, the lowlights. What's up?
Sure. It's a collection of stories and columns that I've done over the last 4 years. Many of them about people fighting back against things that are going to change the stuff that they love about Florida.
Nice.
One of them is a piece about the town of Royal, which is, I think, in Levy County, which was founded by formerly enslaved people, and the DOT was going to run a big road right through the middle of town and obliterate their historic cemetery.
Oh.
And they fought back, and they won, at least for now. I mean, I don't know if you can ever say you won against the DOT, but they won a reprieve at least. And so I think those are stories that are worth telling, I think, to let people know you don't have to take it. You can stand up, you can fight back, you can win. And there are also stories in there about alligators that I mentioned about the cattle industry. There's a piece in there about Tim Dorsey, the late Tim Dorsey. Different stuff like that. And so it's it's got a wonderful cover by Andy Marlatt, the former editorial cartoonist for the Pensacola News Journal, who I think his covers will sell more books than my name on the cover personally. But that's
is it the Florida Press putting it out? Or?
Yes, University of Florida Press is bringing it out, and like I said, it comes out in March. And we're having a kickoff event at Tombolo Books in St. Petersburg with the man, the myth, the legend, Paul Wilburn as the MC. So.
And they can find out more about your book probably just Googling you up as Craig Pittman author.
Yeah. Yes.
And also the book signings.
Yes, definitely. I'll be appearing at different places around the state, including the Lynx in Gainesville, Midtown Reader up in Tallahassee, and Books and Books down in Miami.
Now, will Paul Wilburn be singing at your book signing? Is the question. I
would encourage him to do that because he's got a lovely voice, but I don't know. I can't control
his wife is lovely. I don't know about him.
Mm-hmm.
But.
Well, let me ask, with our last 10 minutes, you're up on the Forgotten Coast. Can we talk a little bit about the proposals to oil and gas exploration up in the Panhandle? I mean, obviously, if you're in the Pensacola area, probably far more aware and greater awareness up there than there is down here. But I mean, if you're
does anything ever bad happen up there?
I have written a column about this, that there are some people, and I'll talk about them in a minute, some people who have proposed drilling an exploratory well in the Apalachicola River Basin. Apalachicola River, which is probably the most pristine river in the South, and certainly important to such activities as oyster farming. Yep. In that area, and they want to come in and drill this exploratory well, and the DEP is wanting to give them a permit. The Apalachicola Riverkeeper folks have sued to stop that. The people who so I got interested in this, and I thought, well, who are these folks that want to do this? They're calling themselves Clearwater, which is just the irony meter is just off the scale there. So I looked up their corporate papers in Tallahassee, and according to their corporate papers, the address for their corporate headquarters is a stable in Wellington. And I thought, well, that's weird. Why is it a stable in Wellington? Well, it turns out they're all a bunch of polo players.
There you
go. They're into polo, and that's what they really are passionate about. So in the column I wrote about this, I said, what we need to do is we need to propose going to Wellington and drilling in the middle of their polo field.
I know Wellington very well.
Right next to those little horse patties.
Yeah, and we'll call it taking the Wells to Wellington. That'll be the big drive. So
beautiful.
That'll be a way.
I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, Apalachicola is like one of the epicenters of the Florida seafood industry. I mean, like he mentioned oystering, but I mean, if you were a sport fisher or shrimping, I mean, like this is the reason why they're able to do that is because it's been, I don't want to say kept pristine, but it's been kind of able to avoid a lot of the mega development that so many other parts of the state have seen. And it's like you ruin that, it's gone forever. You're not getting it back.
So, Craig, Wellington, I think is Palm Beach County, right?
Yeah,
Jason?
Very familiar.
And
hate Wellington. You know what would fix Wellington? White phosphorus.
You know what? I've got no beef with Wellington.
I have beef. Oh, man, John. That was, I am impressed, sir.
My daughter said she might be listening today, so these are dad jokes.
He shoots, he scores.
Yeah.
Oh, bad news.
I'm making notes. I'm going to use that.
No, that was great. I have no beef with Wellington.
Do I get a penny for every copy of the book?
You get an air high five, just like the gentleman who knew where Citra was.
Craig Pittman has written about numerous unusual and interesting people in the state of Florida, including the most tattooed woman in the world.
Yes, that was in my last book, The State You're In. There was a piece in there about how the most tattooed woman in the world had found love at a tattoo parlor. She'd fallen in love and married the guy who is the most tattooed senior citizen in the world. And so there was a romance marked by Guinness Book of World Records.
Oh my gosh.
That piece also included that book also included pieces on.
Craig, they had to fall in love because he'd seen about every square inch of her body.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, there are other pieces in there. It's another collection of stories and columns, and so it's sort of like what's coming out in March. The one in March, I should mention that one thing they both have in common is that they both have pieces on Florida's many nudist resorts. The new one has a piece on the. Florida has more nudist resorts than any other state.
Well, we have Caliente right up in Lutz, right?
Caliente, yes.
And Craig, did you do your research? Is the question?
Well, before I think it was Irma. Before Irma hit Florida, I was supposed to be calling around and asking who was taking evacuees, and I called Caliente and I said, will you be accepting anyone evacuating ahead of the storm? And they said yes, and the good news is you don't have to pack any clothes. So there you go. Anyway, the new book has a piece in there. The previous book, State You're In, had a piece in there about a nudist resort that was having conflicts with the Postal Service over their packages, and the new book has a piece.
God, the jokes just write themselves. I don't even know where to go with this.
The new book has a piece about how the nudist resorts were coping with the pandemic, and quotes a guy saying, "Well, we now have a tan line, but it's not where you think."
Were they opposed to masks?
It's where the masks are. Yeah, no, they weren't opposed to masks.
I'm just trying to imagine a person butt naked with just the face mask on.
Yeah.
There's something really funny about that.
Yeah. Exactly.
I really wouldn't want to expose you to anything that might harm you.
So
there you go. Two of us can dad joke. Look at me. I don't even need kids to make dad jokes.
They're coming, I'm sure. Mermaids in Florida. You mentioned it earlier.
Yes. The previous book, The State You're In, had a big piece on Florida's mermaid industry and how they do not work for scale. But there are mermaids in Weeki Wachee, and they have become sort of the center of a statewide mermaid industry. There are mermaids for hire working in the Panhandle, down in Fort Lauderdale. And in fact, if you saw the HBO TV show, It's Florida Man.
Yep. Oh, God.
There was one of the segments was about a mermaid who was having a conflict with a Wiccan who was married to a rather pushy police officer, and who considers himself a pagan. And the police officer was quoted as saying, pagans, witches, we're all normal. It's not unusual.
No, that's quite that show is my favorite episode is the Mr. Large Neck and his extremely large neck. I mean, that to his credit, the man has an enormous neck. Like, I really don't know what else to say. You could fit a tire around that thing.
Well, mermaids are not just unique, or amateur mermaids are not just unique to Florida. I mentioned my daughter earlier. She is a member of the Washington, D.C. Mermaid Club. She owns about a half dozen mermaid tails and hangs out with a bunch of very nice ladies in various pools doing mermaid things.
There you go. And there's a guy up in Citrus County who actually makes custom-made tails. He calls himself the Mer Tailor. So, and they can run about.
I can't.
I'm serious, and they can run about $6,000.
What?
Yeah, I don't know if my daughter's tails are.
I'm just saying, if
that
your
much,
choice
but-
is a used car or a mermaid tail.
Jason, I know you're going for the tail. All right, we've got a couple more minutes. Jason, we got a call. Let's
We
take
have
it.
one last call.
We're having fun this morning.
This has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much, Craig. We have Fred. It says
sure.
he's from Michigan. I don't know if they're calling from Michigan, but Fred, you are on the air.
Yes, I'm from Upper Michigan, up here on Lake Superior in the Great White North.
How cold is it today?
You're beyond the wall.
Yes, but I've been listening to you for the last few weeks, on your program.
Thank you.
Appreciating it.
Thank you.
I want to let you guys know about a perspective. We come there in the winters, and we really enjoy the trails and the parks, the
Absolutely.
wildlife. And as a tourist, it's evident of what's happening, the degrading of the environmental rules and the overdevelopment without restraint and restriction. There's no zoning, no enforcement. And I wanted to kind of let you know that that's a perspective of a winter tourist, a traveler,
Yep.
that come to the, quote, Sunshine State. But anyway, thank you for the perspective on it. I'm not sure if anyone who cares really is listening, the right people. And, those that are corporations making money and doing development, they really don't care, obviously.
Michiganders, we appreciate you. We appreciate your call. We appreciate you listening. It was
Thank you so much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned many times, I was born here in Tampa. I've seen this area change so much. I've seen us lose so much. It's sad that our parks are sort of the last place. State and national parks are sort of the last place where we can find some peace and nature and that sort of thing. And then, look what the governor does and his staff is they threaten the state parks with what are those?
Pickleball
and golf courses,
hotels.
and hotels
yeah.
and things like that. It's kind of like, what are you thinking? What is the water? Do they have something in the water in Tallahassee that?
I believe it was Ruben Askew. He once said, in Florida, environmental degradation is tantamount to economic suicide. Because
He's absolutely right.
Yeah, because so much of our economy. I mean, I remember. I have a friend who works at the Sierra Club. They once did a study. 30% of jobs here in the Tampa Bay area depend upon, to some extent, a healthy, clean bay. Whether it's the hotels, the waterfront restaurants, there's so much that matters to protecting our environment. And we're really very lucky to have people like Craig and Carl Hyacin and other folks who have been writing about, protecting Florida and the stories that are within us.
All right, you can find Craig Pittman on the Florida Phoenix. Also, check out his website. He's got a book coming out. I'm not advocating anything about buying it because that would be immoral. But anyway, Craig, it's been a joy to have you on the show.
Truly, thank you.
We would like to have you back sometime soon.
Very much
Sure.
so.
Happy to do it.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. This is a wonderful episode. I mean, as always, it really is a shame we didn't have time for Commissioner Joshua Wolstall to get on. We always seem to just, for whatever reason, we're always running out of time before Joshua Wolstall can get on the show. But I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
This is John Dingfelder, Jason Marlowe. You're listening to WMNF or WMNF.org, 88.5 on your FM dial. And we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Take care, everybody.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. Charge the people $1.50 just to see